The legend of Audie Murphy, America's most decorated warrior. There are moments in history when a single man stands against the tide of darkness and refuses to break, when fear itself becomes a choice, and courage transforms into something eternal. This is the story of such a man, a boy who became a soldier who became a legend who never stopped fighting, even when the war had ended. His name was Audie Leon Murphy, and this is how history remembers him. Part 1. Born into darkness. The earth remembers everything. It remembers the cotton fields of Hunt County, Texas, where the soil ran red and cracked beneath an unforgiving sun. It remembers the shacks built from hope and desperation, where families like the Murphys scratched out existence with bleeding hands and broken backs. It remembers June 20th, 1925, when Audie Leon Murphy entered a world that had no mercy to offer him. 7th of 12 children, sharecroppers. Poor doesn't begin to describe what they were. Kingston, Texas, was barely a dot on any map that mattered. A place where dreams came to die beneath the cotton rows, where men aged before their time, where children learned that hunger was just another word for Tuesday. The Murphy family lived in a shack, not a house, a shack, that leaked when it rained and baked when the sun climbed high. Wooden planks held together by faith and desperation. Emmett Berry Murphy, the father, was a shadow of a man. He drifted in and out of their lives like smoke through broken windows. Present one day, gone the next. He fathered 12 children but fed none of them. The responsibility, the weight, the crushing burden of survival fell to others, while he wandered, searching for something he'd never find. Josie Bell Murphy, the mother, carried the weight of the world in her tired eyes. She moved through their meager existence like a ghost, searching for something none of them could name. Audie would remember her hair, long, beautiful, nearly touching the floor when she let it down. She rarely spoke. She didn't need to. Her presence said everything about sacrifice, about enduring when endurance seemed impossible. In 1929, the Great Depression crashed across America like a tidal wave of despair. 1 in 4 workers lost everything. Breadlines stretched for blocks. Banks collapsed. Hope became a commodity more precious than gold. For families like the Murphys, who already lived below the poverty line, the depression was simply more of the same, suffering, deeper and darker. Audie learned early that life owed him nothing. At 5 years old, he picked cotton alongside his siblings, tiny fingers bleeding on the harsh bowls, earning pennies that might mean dinner that night. At 7, he quit school. 5th grade was as far as formal education would take him. The classroom couldn't teach him what the fields already had, that survival required sacrifice, that weakness meant death, that no one was coming to save you. But young Audie had something the fields couldn't take away, a gift. His eyes were sharp, his hands were steady, and when he held a rifle, something changed in him, something focused, something deadly. Hunting wasn't sport for Audie Murphy, it was survival. Every rabbit meant food on the table. Every squirrel meant his younger siblings wouldn't go to bed hungry. Sometimes he had only one bullet, one chance. Miss, and the family starved that night. So he never missed. He hunted with a slingshot when bullets were too expensive. He hunted with borrowed rifles when neighbors took pity. He became a marksman not through training, but through necessity. Every shot had to count. Every pull of the trigger meant life or death for those he loved. The other children whispered about him. The quiet boy who could shoot a bird from the sky at 100 yards. The small, thin kid who brought home game when grown men returned empty-handed. There was something in his eyes even then. A distance, a coldness that came from staring hunger in the face and refusing to blink first. Then, around 1937, Emmett Murphy walked out for the last time. No goodbye. No explanation. He simply disappeared, leaving Josie to manage 12 children alone. Some wounds are deep enough to change a soul forever. This was one of them. Audie, barely 12 years old, watched his father's silhouette fade into nothing and learned that men could abandon everything without a second glance. The family moved in with Josie's sister in Farmersville. Audie took work wherever he could find it, picking cotton, delivering newspapers, pumping gas, clerking in stores. $16 a week jobs that meant everything to a family drowning in poverty. He boarded with his employers sometimes, sleeping in barns or storage rooms, sending every penny home. He grew up fast, too fast. At 16, he became the man of the family when Josie fell ill. She wasted away slowly, her body betraying her, her beautiful hair the only thing that remained unchanged. Audie sat with her in those final days, holding her hand, watching the light fade from her eyes. She died in 1941. He was 16 years old. Years later, when he'd become famous, when reporters asked him about his mother, his voice would crack with a grief that never fully healed. She died when I was 16. She had the most beautiful hair I've ever seen. It reached almost to the floor. She rarely talked and always seemed to be searching for something. What it was, I don't know. We didn't discuss our feelings, but when she passed away, she took something of me with her. It seems I've been searching for it ever since. The younger siblings were sent to an orphanage, the family scattered like seeds in a harsh wind. Audie was alone now, orphaned, 16 years old with no family, no home, no future. Just a rifle and steady hands. He could have broken then. Most would have. Instead, something hardened inside him. Something that would later save hundreds of lives and define American heroism for generations. Then came December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. Audie Murphy heard the news on a crackling radio in a Farmersville shop. Japanese bombers had attacked the American naval base in Hawaii. Thousands dead, ships burning, war. Something ignited in his chest. Here was purpose. Here was meaning. Here was a way to fight back against a world that had taken everything from him. If his life meant nothing in the cotton fields, perhaps it could mean something on a battlefield. Perhaps he could finally stop running from the hunger and the poverty and the ghosts. Perhaps he could become something more than a forgotten sharecropper's son. He tried to enlist the very next day. The Marines looked at the thin, baby-faced boy standing before them, 5 feet 5 inches tall, 110 pounds, soaking wet, with eyes that seemed far older than his years. They laughed. "Come back when you've grown up, kid." The Navy said the same thing. "Too small. Too young. Go home." The Army paratroopers rejected him without a second glance. But Audie Leon Murphy had learned something in those cotton fields. He'd learned that when the world says no, you find another way. He'd learned that survival means fighting, even when fighting seems pointless. For 6 months, he worked to gain weight, drinking milk and eating bananas, until he added a few precious pounds to his frame. His older sister Corinne signed an affidavit, lying about his birth date, adding a year to his life so he'd meet the minimum age requirement. On June 30th, 1942, 10 days after his 17th birthday, or 18th according to the falsified documents, Audie Murphy walked into a recruiting station in Greenville, Texas. This time, they accepted him. The Army didn't know what it was getting. How could they? This quiet kid with the baby face and sad eyes didn't look like a warrior, didn't look like someone who would change the face of American military history, didn't look like the man who would earn every medal for valor the United States could bestow. They saw a boy desperate to escape poverty. They couldn't see the marksman with nerves of steel. They couldn't see the hunter who never missed. They couldn't see the warrior who had been forged in fields of hunger and loss. They couldn't see what war would reveal. Private Audie Murphy, serial number 01692509, entered the United States Army weighing 112 pounds, standing 5 feet 5.5 inches tall, with a 5th grade education and nothing to lose. He had no idea he was about to become immortal. Part 2. The Forging of a Soldier. Camp Walters, Texas, summer of 1942. Hell in different clothing. Basic training was designed to break men down and rebuild them as soldiers. For most recruits, it was a shock to the system. The shouting drill sergeants, the endless marching, the brutal physical demands. For Audie Murphy, it was something different. It was the first time in his life he'd eaten 3 meals a day. The barracks felt like luxury compared to the sharecropper shacks he'd grown up in. The cot was better than the floor he'd slept on. The routine, the structure, the purpose. It all felt like coming home to a place he'd never been. Other soldiers complained. Audie thrived. During close-order drill training, he passed out from heat exhaustion once. His body wasn't used to regular food yet, wasn't conditioned for the physical demands. But he got up. He always got up. That was the thing about Audie Murphy. You could knock him down, but he'd rise again, and again, and again. His fellow soldiers called him Baby because of his youthful face. His commanding officers noticed something else entirely. This quiet kid from Texas never complained, never shirked duty, never showed fear. There was a steadiness to him, a calm that seemed unusual for someone so young. One officer suggested Murphy might be better suited as a headquarters runner, a safer position away from the front lines. Murphy refused, politely but firmly. He hadn't joined the army to run messages. He'd joined to fight. He passed through basic training and moved on to advanced infantry training at Fort Meade, Maryland. Autumn of 1942. The seasons changed. Murphy changed with them. The army taught him how to kill efficiently. They taught him tactics, strategy, the mechanical operation of weapons beyond his hunting rifle. But they couldn't teach him what he already knew in his bones, that when death comes calling, some men freeze and some men fire. The cotton fields had already answered that question. Hunting with one bullet had already taught him to shoot first, shoot straight, and never hesitate. By February 1943, Murphy was boarding a troopship bound for North Africa. He was 17 years old. Most soldiers his age were finishing high school. Audie Murphy was heading to war. The Atlantic Ocean stretched before them, cold and grey and infinite. Murphy stood at the railing, watching America disappear behind him. He was leaving behind a country that had given him nothing but poverty and pain. He was sailing toward a continent on fire. He should have been afraid. Instead, he felt ready. Part 3. Blood on Foreign Soil. Casablanca, Morocco, February 1943. The African sun beat down like a hammer. Audie Murphy, now assigned to Company B, 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, stepped onto foreign soil for the first time in his life. The Rock of the Marne Division, legendary from World War I, warriors who had stopped the German advance at the Marne River in 1918. Murphy would make that legacy his own. But first came months of brutal training. Major General Lucian K. Truscott Jr. commanded the 3rd Division, and he believed in preparation through punishment. His men would march 30 miles in 8 hours, the infamous Truscott Trot. 5 miles per hour for the first hour, 4 miles per hour for the second, 3.5 miles per hour for the final 21 miles. Soldiers collapsed from exhaustion. Murphy finished every march. They drilled with bayonets until their hands bled. They ran obstacle courses in the scorching heat. They practiced amphibious landings until the movements became muscle memory. Truscott was forging them into something harder than steel, something unbreakable. Murphy was promoted to private first class on May 7, 1943. A small step, but recognition nonetheless. The officers noticed him. The other soldiers noticed him. There was something about the quiet kid from Texas. He never bragged, never boasted. But when they ran live fire exercises, his targets had holes in the center. Every time. On May 13, 1943, Axis forces in North Africa surrendered. Over 250,000 German and Italian soldiers became prisoners. The 3rd Infantry Division helped process them. Murphy saw the faces of the enemy for the first time. Men not so different from himself, defeated and exhausted. War was no longer an abstraction. It had faces, it had names, it had consequences. July 1943 arrived with orders. Sicily. Operation Husky. The Allied invasion of the island fortress that Benito Mussolini called the unsinkable aircraft carrier of the Mediterranean. The gateway to Italy. The beginning of the liberation of Europe. On July 10, 1943, Audie Murphy waded ashore at Licata with the first assault wave. Naval guns pounded the coastline. Aircraft screamed overhead. The beaches erupted with fire and smoke and the screams of wounded men. Murphy's war had begun. The fighting in Sicily was brutal. The island was mountainous, rocky, defended by German and Italian forces who knew every ridge and valley. The 3rd Infantry Division pushed inland, taking towns 1 bloody mile at a time. On a scouting patrol near Canacattì, Murphy encountered 2 Italian officers attempting to escape on white horses. His rifle came up smooth and steady. 2 shots. 2 bodies fell from their mounts. The horses galloped away. Murphy's platoon leader stared at him, disturbed by how coldly the young soldier had killed. "Why'd you do that?" Murphy's response was matter-of-fact, emotionless. "That's our job." He was 18 years old. He'd killed 2 men without hesitation, Without remorse, something in him had shifted. The boy from the cotton fields was gone. What remained was a soldier who understood that war demanded certain things. Hesitation meant death, yours or your brother's. Mercy was a luxury no one could afford. On July 15th, Murphy was promoted to corporal. Recognition of his skills, his composure under fire, his natural leadership. But Sicily taught him another lesson, one more painful than any bullet wound. War was filth and chaos and fear. War was mountains climbed under heavy packs. War was thirst that drove men mad. War was watching friends die in ways that would haunt you forever. All the romantic notions he'd carried from America died in the Sicilian dust. Then malaria struck. Murphy collapsed with fever, shaking violently, delirious. The disease ravaged him for weeks. When he recovered, weak and skeletal, the army tried to reassign him to another unit. Murphy refused. Company B was his home now. These men were his brothers. He wouldn't abandon them. By August 17, 1943, Sicily fell to Allied forces. The Axis evacuated across the Strait of Messina to mainland Italy. The 3rd Infantry Division had won its first campaign of the war. Murphy had earned his first battle star, but Italy was waiting. September 1943, Salerno. The 3rd Infantry Division landed as part of Operation Avalanche, the Allied assault on mainland Italy. The Germans were ready. They poured artillery and machine gun fire onto the beaches. Men died before they reached dry land. The sand ran red. Murphy moved through it like he'd been born for this. While others froze or panicked, he advanced. While others took cover, he found targets. His rifle barked again and again. German soldiers fell. The division fought its way inland through some of the most brutal terrain imaginable. The mountains of Italy were ancient, unforgiving, defended by an enemy that gave no quarter. Every ridge was a fortress. Every valley was a killing zone. November 1943, the Volturno River Campaign. Murphy, his best friend Latty Tipton, a fellow Texan who'd become closer than a brother, and another soldier were on patrol when German machine gun fire erupted. The third soldier died instantly, cut down before he could react. Murphy and Tipton dove for cover. Murphy's eyes went cold. He'd learned to kill in Sicily, but this was different. This was personal. These Germans had just killed one of his men. He methodically hunted the machine gun nest, moving with the patience of a hunter stalking prey. When he found them, his rifle spoke. The machine gun fell silent. Tipton looked at his friend and saw something that made him shiver. Murphy's face was empty of emotion. Whatever had once been soft in him was gone now, burned away by gunpowder and blood. By January 1944, the 3rd Infantry Division was ordered to Anzio for Operation Shingle, an amphibious landing designed to flank the German defensive lines. But Murphy couldn't participate. Malaria struck him down again, and he was hospitalized in Naples while his company hit the beaches. He recovered by January 29th, just in time for the first Battle of Cisterna. The fighting at Anzio was hell on earth. The Germans had the high ground. They pounded the Allied beachhead with artillery day and night. Soldiers lived in muddy foxholes under constant bombardment, unable to advance or retreat. Murphy was promoted to platoon sergeant. His leadership abilities were becoming undeniable. Men followed him because he led from the front, because he never asked them to do anything he wouldn't do himself, because when shells fell, Murphy was the calm in the storm. On March 2nd, 1944, Murphy and his platoon took shelter in an abandoned Italian farmhouse during a German counterattack. A panzer tank rolled past their position. Instead of hiding, Murphy crawled out into the open armed with rifle grenades. Alone, exposed, close enough to see the rivets on the tank, he fired. The grenades found their mark. The tank erupted in flames, its crew killed. Murphy earned his first Bronze Star, with V device for valor. But the malaria returned. He spent another week hospitalized, his body fighting the disease, while his mind screamed to return to his men. By the time he recovered, the 3rd Division had been stuck at Anzio for 4 months. 4 months of hell, of constant artillery, of men dying in the mud. On May 8, 1944, 61 members of Company B, including Murphy, were awarded the Combat Infantryman Badge. It was recognition that they'd endured sustained ground combat, that they'd faced the enemy and survived. May 1944. Rome fell to Allied forces. The 3rd Infantry Division marched through the Eternal City as liberators. Italian civilians threw flowers and wept with joy. For a moment, war seemed almost worth it, but only for a moment. August 1944 brought new orders. Operation Dragoon, the invasion of southern France. Murphy had been in combat for over a year now. He'd seen more death than most men see in 10 lifetimes. He'd been wounded, sickened, promoted. He'd killed more enemy soldiers than he could count. His decorations were accumulating: Bronze Stars, Purple Hearts, the Combat Infantryman Badge. But the worst was still ahead. On August 15, 1944, Murphy hit the beaches at Ramatuelle in southern France with the first assault wave. German resistance was fierce. Artillery shells tore the beach apart. Machine gun fire cut down soldiers like wheat. Murphy advanced through it all. During the fighting, a group of German soldiers pretended to surrender, hands raised, weapons down. When Murphy's best friend, Laddie Tipton, moved forward to take them prisoner, the Germans opened fire. Tipton died in a burst of machine gun fire, murdered by men who'd falsely surrendered. Something broke in Audie Murphy that day, something that could never be repaired. He stood over his friend's body, and rage, pure, white-hot rage, consumed him. Every death he'd seen until now had been tragedy. This was betrayal. This was murder. This was personal. Murphy seized a machine gun and charged the German position alone. He didn't think, didn't plan, just moved, firing, advancing through a storm of bullets that somehow never found him. He killed the Germans who'd murdered Tipton. Then he killed the Germans behind them. Then he kept killing, moving like death incarnate through their positions. When he ran out of ammunition, he grabbed German grenades and kept going. He captured an entire German position single-handedly, taking prisoners who stared at him with something like terror in their eyes. For this action, Murphy earned the Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor. But the medal meant nothing to him. Laddie Tipton was dead, and no decoration could bring him back. The light in Murphy's eyes. The light in Murphy's eyes changed after that day. Soldiers who knew him saw it. He'd been a good soldier before. Now, he was something else, something harder, something that never missed, never hesitated, never felt mercy. By autumn of 1944, the 3rd Infantry Division was fighting through northeastern France. The campaign was relentless. Town after town fell to the advancing Allies. Murphy's kill count rose. 50 confirmed, then 70, then 100. On September 15th, he was wounded by an exploding mortar shell. Shrapnel tore into his body. He received his first Purple Heart. He was hospitalized briefly, then returned to the front lines. October 26th, near Bruvillers, he was shot in the hip during a firefight. He received his second Purple Heart. Again, he returned to combat as soon as he could walk. By December 1944, Murphy had been in sustained combat for over a year. He'd earned battlefield promotions, numerous decorations, and a reputation as one of the finest soldiers in the 3rd Infantry Division. His superiors recognized his leadership abilities and his courage under fire. But no one, not his commanders, not his fellow soldiers, not even Murphy himself, knew what was about to happen. No one knew that January 1945 would transform Audie Murphy from an excellent soldier into an American legend. No one knew that a frozen forest in France would become the stage for one of the most heroic actions in military history. The Colmar Pocket was waiting, and with it, destiny. Part 4. The Frozen Hell. Winter descended on Europe like a curse. December 1944. The Colmar Pocket. 850 square miles of French territory still held by German forces in the Vosges Mountains. A huge, dangerous bridgehead west of the Rhine River, like an iron fist threatening the Allied advance. The Germans had held it since November, and they weren't giving it up without a fight. The 3rd Infantry Division was ordered to eliminate the pocket. Audie Murphy, still recovering from his hip wound, rejoined his platoon on January 15, 1945. He'd been promoted to 2nd lieutenant with a battlefield commission. Recognition of his leadership, his tactical brilliance, his courage that seemed to know no limits. He was 19 years old. Most American teenagers were in high school. Murphy commanded men in combat. The cold was unbearable. Temperatures plunged below freezing. Snow covered everything in a white shroud that turned red wherever men fell. The wind cut through uniforms like knives. Soldiers' fingers froze to metal triggers. Frostbite claimed as many casualties as German bullets. On January 23, 1945, the 30th Infantry Regiment advanced through the Bois de Redefining, a forest near the village of Holzwihr. German forces hit them hard. 10 tanks, over 100 infantrymen. The Americans were caught in open ground, unable to dig foxholes in the frozen earth. The slaughter was horrific. Men fell by the dozens. The unit was shattered, forced to withdraw from the woods, leaving their dead behind. The next day, the 15th Regiment was ordered to retake that same cursed ground. Company B led the advance. It was a death sentence, and everyone knew it. The fighting on January 24th was so intense that Company B was decimated before they even reached their objective. Of the 120 enlisted men, 102 were killed or wounded. Every officer except one was killed. That one was Lieutenant Audie Murphy. By midnight on January 25th, the survivors of Company B had pushed 600 yards into the woods. They were in position north of Holzwihr, exhausted, freezing, terrified. The village of Holzwihr sat in plain view across snow-covered fields. It was heavily fortified. German forces controlled the high ground, and the Americans couldn't dig in. The ground was frozen solid. Picks bounced off it like hitting concrete. The men tried desperately to create foxholes, knowing that dawn would bring another attack. They chipped away at the frozen earth, making barely any progress, their hands bleeding, their breath coming in frozen clouds. Murphy tried to sleep that night, but couldn't. The sound of picks hitting frozen ground beat against his skull like drums. He had 18 men left in Company B. 18 men to hold a position against an enemy that had tanks, artillery, and fresh reinforcements. He knew what was coming. This night seemed unusually long, he would later write, and the snow colder than I ever dreamed it could be. The 18 men left in Company B had been digging in that goddamn snow-covered granite, and the only benefit received from it was the exercise, which kept them from becoming stiff and immobile with the cold. Dawn broke on January 26, 1945. It was -14 degrees Fahrenheit. Murphy was at his forward command post, a shallow depression that barely qualified as cover, when the call came through from battalion headquarters. The expected reinforcements from the 2nd Battalion hadn't arrived yet. "Hold your position," came the order. "Hold your position. With 18 men against an enemy force 10 times your size. Hold your position in frozen ground where you can't dig in. Hold your position or die trying." Murphy acknowledged the order. What else could he do? At 1400 hours, 2 p.m., the German counterattack began. Artillery shells screamed out of the sky, exploding across the American positions. The ground erupted in geysers of frozen earth and fire. Then the infantry appeared, emerging from Holzwihr like ghosts in white winter camouflage. 250 German soldiers and 6 Panzer tanks. Murphy watched them come across the snow-covered fields. A mile away. Then half a mile. Then closer. Close enough to see their faces beneath their helmets. "From my forward shallow emplacement," Murphy recalled, "I saw the counterattack forming with 6 tanks and about 250 foot soldiers garbed in white suits, so it would have been impossible to spot them sooner or any farther away than a mile." He grabbed the field telephone and started calling in artillery coordinates. His voice was steady, calm, mathematical. He directed fire with the precision of a surgeon, dropping shells on the advancing Germans. Men disappeared in explosions, but more kept coming. The German tanks advanced along a narrow dirt road that led straight into the woods, straight toward Murphy's position. Company B was stretched across the edge of the forest in a thin defensive line. 2 American tank destroyers sat astride the road, their guns pointed toward the enemy. 5 armored vehicles provided support. It wasn't enough. Everyone knew it wasn't enough, but they would fight anyway. The German artillery intensified. Shells landed among the American positions, killing and wounding. Murphy's radio operator was wounded. Another soldier fell. Then another. The defensive line started to crumble. One of the American tank destroyers took a direct hit. Fire erupted from its engine. Flames licked up the sides. The crew abandoned it, running for the safety of the woods. The burning tank destroyer sat there, maybe 50 yards from Murphy's position. Its turret mounted a .50 caliber machine gun. Mardouse, the soldiers called it, a heavy weapon capable of tearing through infantry and light armor alike. The German tanks were getting closer. 200 yards. 150. Murphy made his decision. He ordered his men to fall back to prepared positions deeper in the woods. They looked at him like he was crazy. "What about you, Lieutenant?" "I'll stay here and direct the artillery." "Now move!" They hesitated, but orders were orders. The men of Company B withdrew, leaving Murphy alone at his forward command post, with nothing but a field telephone and his M1 carbine. Alone against 6 tanks and 250 enemy soldiers. The German infantry advanced in waves, using the tanks as cover. Murphy fired his carbine until it was empty, dropping soldier after soldier. His marksmanship was inhuman. Every shot found its mark, but there were too many of them. They kept coming. Then Murphy did something that defied reason. He ran toward the burning tank destroyer, the one that had taken a direct hit, the one engulfed in flames, the one that could explode at any second. Its fuel tanks full, ammunition cooking in the heat. Any rational person would have run the other direction. Murphy climbed on top of it. He positioned himself behind the .50 caliber machine gun, telephoning in his one hand, the gun's grips in the other. Flames licked at his boots. Smoke choked the air. The metal beneath him was scorching hot, even through his uniform. The Germans stared in disbelief. Here was one American soldier, standing fully exposed on a burning tank destroyer, manning a machine gun, completely alone. It was suicide. They would kill him in seconds. Except they didn't. Murphy's finger found the trigger. The .50 caliber roared to life. The heavy rounds tore through the German infantry. Men fell like dominoes, cut down by the devastating fire. Murphy swept the gun left and right, methodical, precise, deadly. He'd grown up hunting with one bullet. Now he had hundreds, and every burst found flesh. The Germans tried to flank him from the right. Murphy spotted them creeping through the snow. He shifted his aim. The squad died before they got close. The German tanks opened fire at his position. Shells exploded around the tank destroyer. Shrapnel whined through the air. Machine gun bullets sparked off metal. Murphy never stopped firing. The telephone was pressed to his ear. He called in artillery coordinates while operating the machine gun. His voice was steady, emotionless, like he was ordering coffee instead of directing death from above. Shells landed among the German formations, killing dozens more. "Bring it in closer," Murphy ordered. "Danger close. Right on my position." The artillery officer on the other end of the line argued. That would mean dropping shells on Murphy himself. "You'll be killed!" "Do it! Now!" Shells began falling so close that the shockwaves nearly knocked Murphy off his perch. Shrapnel tore through German soldiers only yards away. But Murphy was untouched, protected by some miracle or curse that no one could explain. The Germans tried everything. Machine gun fire, tank cannons, mortars, infantry assaults from multiple directions. They threw everything they had at this one insane American standing on a burning tank, and he just kept killing them. 10 minutes passed. 20. 30. The gun got so hot it burned his hands through his gloves. The flames from the tank destroyer grew more intense. The ammunition could cook off any second. The fuel could explode. Death was one spark away. Murphy didn't move. 50 minutes. The German assault was wavering. Bodies littered the snow. Their formations were breaking apart. The tanks without infantry support became vulnerable. They started to pull back. An hour passed. An hour of standing alone against an army. An hour of death delivered with machine gun precision. An hour of refusing to break, refusing to run, refusing to die. Then Murphy took a bullet. It hit his leg. Pain shot through him like lightning. Blood soaked his uniform. But his hands never left the gun. He kept firing, kept calling coordinates, kept defending his position like some avenging angel immune to fear or mortality. Part 5. The Price of Glory. By the time World War II ended in Europe on May 8, 1945, Audie Murphy had become something more than a soldier. He'd become a ghost, walking among the living. VE Day, victory in Europe. The war that had consumed the world for 6 years was finally over. In every Allied nation, people poured into the streets, celebrating, dancing, crying with relief. Church bells rang. Confetti fell like snow. Strangers kissed. The nightmare had ended. Murphy was in Cannes, France that day, in a hotel room. He could hear the celebrations in the streets below, the laughter, the joy. The pure, unfiltered relief of people who'd survived. He felt none of it. He stood at the window, looking down at the crowds, and felt nothing but emptiness. A chasm between himself and everyone who hadn't seen what he'd seen, hadn't done what he'd done, hadn't killed over 240 men, and watched friends die in ways that haunted every waking moment. This was the price of glory. This was what surviving cost. The world celebrated while warriors bled inside wounds no one could see. By the war's end, Murphy's list of decorations read like something from fiction. The Medal of Honor, the highest award for valor given for his actions at Holtzwihr. The Distinguished Service Cross, awarded for his single-handed assault after Lati Tipton's murder, second only to the Medal of Honor. 2 Silver Stars, for gallantry in action against the enemy. The Legion of Merit, for outstanding service and leadership. 2 Bronze Stars with V device, for heroic or meritorious achievement in combat, including the tank destroyer he'd blown up at Anzio. 3 Purple Hearts, for wounds received in combat. Mortar shrapnel, bullet through the hip, leg wound at Holtzwihr. The Good Conduct Medal, for exemplary behavior. The American Campaign Medal, for service within the American theater. The European African Middle Eastern Campaign Medal with 9 battle stars and 1 arrowhead device, representing 9 major campaigns and 2 amphibious assault landings. The World War II Victory Medal, for service during the war. The Army of Occupation Medal with Germany clasp, for occupation duty. 3 Presidential Unit Citations, awarded to Company B and the 3rd Infantry Division for extraordinary heroism. The Combat Infantryman Badge, worn by soldiers who've engaged in active ground combat. And from France and Belgium, the French Legion of Honor, Chevalier grade, one of France's highest decorations. 2 French Croix de Guerre medals with Silver Star and Palm, for heroism on French soil. The French Liberation Medal, for participation in the liberation of France. The French Fourragère, a unit award worn on the shoulder. The Belgian Croix de Guerre 1940 with Palm, for extraordinary bravery. 33 awards and decorations total. Every medal for valor the United States Army could give. Multiple decorations from allied nations. All earned before his 20th birthday. Audie Murphy was officially the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II. A title he would hold for the rest of his life. A record that, in all likelihood, will never be broken. But medals are cold comfort when the memories burn. On June 10, 1945, Murphy returned to the United States. He'd been overseas for 29 months, in combat for nearly 2 years. He'd killed over 240 enemy soldiers. Confirmed kills, not estimates. The actual number was likely far higher. He'd been wounded 3 times. Hospitalized multiple times for malaria. He'd earned every decoration an American soldier could earn. He was 19 years old. He looked even younger. His arrival in Texas was met with parades, banquets, speeches. Politicians lined up to shake his hand. Reporters surrounded him with cameras and questions. Everyone wanted a piece of the war hero. On July 16, 1945, Life magazine put Murphy on its cover. The headline read, "Most Decorated Soldier." The photograph showed his baby face beneath his helmet, decorated uniform, eyes that seemed to stare through the camera into something distant and terrible. That photograph changed everything. Actor James Cagney saw the cover. The legendary Hollywood star was struck by Murphy's face, so young, so haunted, so utterly incongruous with the descriptions of his battlefield heroics. Cagney sent Murphy an invitation. "Come to Hollywood. Let me help you start a new life." Murphy barely noticed. He was too busy trying to survive peacetime. What nobody understood, what even Murphy didn't fully understand yet, was that the war wasn't over for him. It would never be over. The battles might have ended, but the demons had followed him home. He couldn't sleep. When he tried, the nightmares came. German soldiers rising from the snow. Lati Tipton dying again and again. The burning tank destroyer beneath his feet. The faces of the men he'd killed. Young faces. Old faces. Terrified faces frozen in death. He'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Loud noises made him jump. Crowds made him anxious. Normalcy felt wrong, impossible, like wearing clothes that didn't fit. How do you go back to being a civilian when you've spent 2 years as a weapon? How do you connect with people who've never killed, never watched friends die, never stood alone against an army? In 1947, a military doctor examined Murphy for a post-service medical evaluation. The report noted, symptoms of headaches, vomiting, and nightmares about the war. Patient takes sleeping pills to help prevent nightmares. They called it battle fatigue back then, sometimes shell shock. World War I terminology for a condition nobody really understood. Today we have a better name for it, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Murphy was suffering from severe PTSD before the term even existed. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow, not for protection, for the psychological comfort it provided. The weight of it, the security, the knowledge that if the nightmares came true, he could fight back. He couldn't tell anyone about this. Not really. Warriors didn't talk about weakness. Heroes weren't supposed to be broken. So he suffered in silence, smiling for the cameras, accepting awards, pretending that the war had ended when the shooting stopped. But several months passed after Cagney's invitation before Murphy finally accepted. His friends convinced him. What else was there to do? He had no family left, no education beyond 5th grade, no job prospects. The only thing he knew how to do was kill people, and peacetime didn't need that skill. In September 1945, Murphy arrived in Hollywood. James Cagney took one look at him and was horrified. Murphy was emaciated, pale, obviously suffering. Cagney had prepared a hotel room for him, but he cancelled it immediately. Instead, he took Murphy into his own home, gave him his own bed, spent weeks nursing the young veteran back to something resembling health. Years later, Cagney would describe that first meeting. I got the shock of my life. Audie was very thin. His complexion was bluish-grey. He was in such a nervous condition that I was afraid he might jump out of a window. I took him home and gave him my bed. For 3 weeks, Murphy lived with the Cagney family. They fed him, cared for him, gave him space to exist without pretending. Then Murphy returned to Texas briefly, before Hollywood's pull drew him back. But Hollywood didn't want him. Not at first. Oh, they wanted the hero. They wanted the story. They wanted to capitalize on his fame. But Murphy the person? Murphy the actor? He had no training, no experience, no connections beyond Cagney's generosity. Cagney Productions signed him to a contract at $150 per week and paid for acting and dancing lessons. But it quickly became clear that Murphy, despite his fame, despite his natural charisma, didn't have the skills for stardom. Not yet. The Cagneys were reluctant to admit defeat, but they eventually had to tell Murphy the truth. He wasn't ready. Maybe he'd never be ready. Hollywood was brutal, and talent didn't always correlate with heroism. Murphy's next 2 years in California were agony. He took bit parts in films where he barely had lines. Beyond Glory in 1948 gave him a small role. Texas, Brooklyn, and Heaven the same year. Another forgettable appearance. The work dried up. The money ran out. He ended up sleeping in a gymnasium owned by his friend Terry Hunt, whom he'd later name a son after. The war hero, the most decorated soldier in American history, was sleeping on a gym floor, nearly broke, wondering if coming to Hollywood had been the biggest mistake of his life. He was lonely, isolated, haunted by nightmares that never stopped. The demons he'd brought home from Europe were louder than any applause. This was the price of glory. Not the medals, not the parades, not the fame. The real price was the emptiness, the inability to connect with people who hadn't seen what he'd seen, the nightmares, the loneliness, the knowledge that he'd left pieces of himself scattered across European battlefields, and no amount of recognition could bring those pieces back. He was a hero. He was broken. He was 22 years old, and he'd already lived more lives than most men experience in 80 years. And his story was far from over. Part 6. The Silver Screen's Haunted Star. Sometimes, salvation comes from unexpected places. For Audie Murphy, it came from Texas theater owners who refused to let Hollywood forget him. Men like Paul Short and others who'd known Murphy before the war, who remembered the quiet kid from Hunt County, who believed he deserved better than obscurity. In 1949, Allied Artists was financing a film called Bad Boy, a story about troubled youth designed to promote work with at-risk children. Short was producing it, and he called Murphy. There was a role, the lead role. Allied Artists' president didn't want Murphy, too inexperienced, too unknown as an actor despite his military fame. He wanted someone proven. The Texas theater owners made their position clear. Murphy plays the lead, or we pull our financing. Money talks. Murphy got the part, and something unexpected happened. He was good, really good. His natural screen presence, that quiet intensity, those haunted eyes, that ability to convey emotion without speaking, translated beautifully to film. The baby face that had made drill sergeants laugh now made audiences sympathize. Bad Boy performed well enough to catch Universal Studios' attention. They signed Murphy to a 7-year contract. It was 1949. He was 24 years old. The struggling actor sleeping on a gymnasium floor suddenly had steady work. But Hollywood came with its own demons. Murphy continued to suffer from PTSD. The nightmares intensified. He still couldn't sleep without a loaded pistol nearby. Loud noises from film sets would send him into panic attacks. He'd disappear for hours, found later sitting alone, staring at nothing. His temper, always short, a product of his impoverished childhood, became explosive. Minor provocations could trigger violent outbursts. He got into fights, made enemies, scared people who didn't understand that this wasn't Murphy being difficult. This was Murphy fighting a war that never ended. But when the cameras rolled, he transformed. Universal put him in a string of B-westerns, low-budget films that played in small theaters and drive-ins. Nothing spectacular, but they proved Murphy could carry a film. His Texas drawl was authentic. His ability to handle firearms was unmatched. When he drew a prop gun, the movement was so fast, so smooth, so professional that it startled other actors. Because Murphy wasn't acting. Those were real skills, earned in blood. In 1950, Murphy met director John Huston, who saw something in the young veteran beyond his war record. Huston was planning an adaptation of Stephen Crane's The Red Badge of Courage, the definitive novel about a young soldier's first experience with combat and cowardice. Huston wanted Murphy for the lead role of Henry Fleming, the young Union soldier who flees his first battle, lives with shame, then redeems himself through courage. It was inspired casting. Murphy knew that story intimately. He'd lived versions of it. The fear, the shame, the desperate need to prove yourself, the transformation that combat demands. The Red Badge of Courage was released in 1951. MGM's production was troubled. Budget cuts, studio interference, editing battles. But Murphy's performance was universally praised. Critics noted his ability to convey internal struggle with minimal dialogue. His eyes told the story his words couldn't. The film didn't perform well commercially. Too artistic, too psychological for 1950s audiences expecting action. But it established Murphy as a legitimate actor, not just a war hero playing dress-up. Around this same time, Murphy met David "Spec" McClure, a writer who would change his life in unexpected ways. McClure encouraged Murphy to write about his war experiences. At first, Murphy resisted. Who wanted to read about that? Who wanted to relive those memories? But McClure persisted, and eventually Murphy began dictating his stories. What emerged was To Hell and Back, Murphy's autobiography, published in 1949. The book was raw, honest, haunting. Murphy didn't glorify war, didn't make himself out to be superhuman. He wrote about fear, about loss, about the friends who never came home. He wrote about Lati Tipton, about the cold nights in Italy, about watching men die. The book became a national bestseller. Americans devoured it. This wasn't propaganda. This wasn't sanitized heroism. This was the truth of war from a man who'd been there, who'd done things most people couldn't imagine, who'd survived when survival seemed impossible. Universal Studios bought the rights and planned a film adaptation. The question was, who would play Audie Murphy? Murphy suggested Tony Curtis, a bigger star, someone who could carry the box office weight. But director Jesse Hibbs and producer Aaron Rosenberg had a different idea. "You should play yourself," they told him. Murphy was horrified. Playing himself? Reliving those moments on camera? Watching the actors around him pretend to be his dead friends? Having to recreate the moment Lattie Tipton died in his arms? "I can't," he said. "I don't want to cash in on my war experience." But they convinced him. Argued that no one else could capture the truth of his story, that his presence would give the film authenticity impossible to fake, that he owed it to the men who didn't come home to tell their story right. Reluctantly, Murphy agreed. Filming To Hell and Back in 1955 was psychological torture. Murphy was 30 years old, playing himself at ages 17 to 20. The age difference didn't matter. He still looked young, still carried that baby face that made his war record seem impossible. But recreating those moments broke something inside him. The scene where his best friend dies. The Holtzweiler sequence where he climbs onto the burning tank destroyer. Watching actors play German soldiers he'd actually killed. The sounds of gunfire, explosions, the chaos that had defined 2 years of his life. Audie Murphy, the actor, was suffering from the condition tremendously by the time they made that movie. Historian David Smith later wrote, Murphy was essentially using his acting career to repeatedly traumatize himself, reliving the worst moments of his life for entertainment. But he did it anyway. Because the men who died deserved to be remembered, because their story mattered, because if his suffering could give meaning to their sacrifice, then maybe it was worth it. To Hell and Back premiered in 1955. It was a massive hit, Universal's highest-grossing film until Jaws 20 years later. Audiences packed theaters to see the real Audie Murphy play himself, to witness the defining moment of American heroism at Holtzweiler. The film made Murphy a star, a genuine, bankable Hollywood leading man. Universal gave him latitude in choosing roles. He starred in Night Passage, 1957, with James Stewart, The Unforgiven, 1960, with Burt Lancaster, dozens of westerns where he played heroes, and, occasionally, cold-blooded anti-heroes that felt uncomfortably close to who he really was. He was good in them. Better than good. His understated acting style, his natural charisma, his ability to convey depth with a glance, it all worked. But success didn't heal him. Murphy married actress Wanda Hendricks in 1949. The marriage lasted less than 2 years. Murphy's PTSD made him volatile, unpredictable. Hendricks later claimed he'd held her at gunpoint during one of his episodes. She described him as guilt-ridden and tearful over footage of German war orphans, then explosively angry moments later. In 1951, Murphy married Pamela Archer, a Braniff Airlines hostess. They had 2 sons, Terry Michael, born in 1952, and James Shannon, born in 1954. Both boys were named after Murphy's closest friends, Terry Hunt and James Shannon, men who'd helped him survive Hollywood's early years. Pamela was patient, understanding, strong enough to weather Murphy's darkness, but even she couldn't fix what was broken inside him. By the mid-1960s, Murphy's condition had worsened. The nightmares were constant. The insomnia was debilitating. He began taking sleeping pills, doctor-prescribed, perfectly legal, to get any rest at all. The medication was called Placidil, a powerful sedative. It worked. For a while. Then Murphy realized he was addicted. He couldn't sleep without it. His body craved it. His mind depended on it. He'd become dependent on a drug. And that realization, for a man who'd survived everything war could throw at him through sheer willpower, was devastating. In the mid-1960s, Murphy made a decision that defined his courage as much as any battlefield action. He checked himself into a hotel room, locked the door, threw away the pills, and went cold turkey. For 7 days, he suffered through withdrawal symptoms that would have broken most people. Shaking, sweating, hallucinations, his body screaming for the medication it had grown dependent on. 7 days in hell, alone in a hotel room, fighting a war against himself. He emerged clean, free from chemical dependency through pure, stubborn willpower. But he also emerged, determined to use his fame for something important. Murphy had always been private about his struggles. Heroes didn't admit weakness. Warriors didn't talk about mental health. But watching Korean War and Vietnam War veterans come home to the same demons he'd faced, Murphy realized his silence was hurting people. So he broke the taboo. He started speaking publicly about PTSD, battle fatigue, as it was still called. He gave interviews where he discussed his nightmares, his insomnia, his struggles with adjustment. He called on the US government to study the emotional impact of combat, to extend health benefits to address mental health issues. "I have a condition," he told reporters, "that makes me relive the war constantly. I see the faces of the men who died. I hear the sounds. It never goes away." Blasser. His advocacy was revolutionary. This was the 1960s. Men didn't talk about trauma. Soldiers especially didn't admit psychological wounds. But Murphy, America's most decorated warrior, was saying publicly, "I'm suffering. I need help." And so do thousands of others. It gave other veterans permission to seek help, gave them hope that they weren't weak for struggling, proved that even heroes bled. 5 months after Murphy's death, in 1971, U.S. Congressman Olin Teague introduced legislation to establish the Audie Murphy Memorial VA Hospital in San Antonio. It was dedicated in 1973, a permanent tribute to Murphy's advocacy. But in the mid to late 1960s, Murphy's career was declining. Universal Studios had been bought by MCA and refocused on television. The studio system that had nurtured contract players was dying. Cheap B-westerns, Murphy's bread and butter, were becoming obsolete. His final starring role was 40 Guns to Apache Pass in 1967. After that, work dried up. Murphy tried other ventures. He bred quarter horses at ranches in California and Arizona. His horses raced at Del Mar. He invested in business deals, tried songwriting. Murphy was actually a talented songwriter. His lyrics, co-written with Scott Turner, included hits like Shutters and Boards and When the Wind Blows in Chicago, recorded by Dean Martin, Eddie Arnold, and others. His poetry, dark, haunting, beautiful, revealed depths most people never suspected. One poem, The Crosses Grow on Anzio, appeared in To Hell and Back, attributed to a fictional soldier named Kerrigan. It was actually Murphy's work. "Oh, gather round me, comrades, and listen while I speak of a war, a war, a war where hell is 6 feet deep. Along the shore the cannons roar. Oh, how can a soldier sleep? The going's slow on Anzio, and hell is 6 feet deep." But poetry and songwriting didn't pay the bills. Murphy's investments failed. He lost $260,000 in an Algerian oil deal. The IRS came after him for unpaid taxes. His gambling, horses, cards, risky business ventures left him nearly broke. By 1968, Murphy was forced to declare bankruptcy. The most decorated American soldier of World War II was drowning in debt. Despite his financial troubles, Murphy refused offers to appear in alcohol and cigarette commercials. He was mindful of his influence on young people. If he couldn't be a hero in life, he could at least not set a bad example. His pride wouldn't allow him to fail quietly. He kept working, kept hustling, kept trying to climb out of the hole. Business meetings, investment opportunities, anything to rebuild. He was still fighting, still refusing to surrender, just like he had on that burning tank destroyer in France. But even warriors can't fight forever. And on May 28, 1971, fate finally caught up with Audie Murphy. Part 7. The Final Patrol. May 28, 1971. The sky over Virginia was thick with clouds and rain. Weather reports warned of poor visibility, low ceilings, fog settling into the mountain valleys. Not a good day for flying. Especially not for visual flight rules navigation. But business waited for no one. Audie Murphy was 45 years old now. His movie career was behind him. His financial troubles weighed heavily. But he was still fighting, still looking for the next opportunity, still refusing to quit. He'd been invited to a business meeting in Martinsville, Virginia. Something about investments, about potential deals that might help him climb out of debt. It wasn't Hollywood glamour. It wasn't war heroism. It was just life. Difficult, unglamorous, necessary. At DeKalb Peachtree Airport in Atlanta, Georgia, an Aero Commander 680 twin-engine aircraft prepared for departure. The plane was owned by Colorado Aviation Inc. and had just been acquired recently. So recently that its FAA registration wouldn't even be issued until June 8th, 11 days in the future. The pilot was Herman Butler of El Paso, Texas, 43 years old, former Navy seaman, experienced with over 8,000 hours of flight time. He held a private pilot license for single and multi-engine aircraft. But significantly, critically, Butler was not instrument-rated. He couldn't legally fly in weather conditions that required instruments, and he had only 6 hours of experience in this particular type of aircraft. 5 passengers boarded that morning: Audie Murphy, Claude Crosby, Kim Doty, Jack Littleton, Raymond Prater, all business associates heading to the same meeting. The flight plan was simple: Atlanta to Martinsville, straight shot, should take about an hour. Weather conditions? Deteriorating. Butler requested clearance under Visual Flight Rules, VFR. This meant flying by sight, using landmarks and horizon references instead of instruments. It was legal as long as weather conditions remained suitable. The tower cleared them for departure. The Aero Commander lifted off, engines roaring, climbing into the gray Virginia sky. Nobody on the ground knew it would be the last time anyone saw them alive. The flight progressed normally at first. Butler traversated northeast, following his planned route. But weather in the Virginia mountains is treacherous, unpredictable. Conditions can change in minutes. Clear skies become fog. Visibility drops to 0. Somewhere over Roanoke County, near the small town of Newcastle, the Aero Commander entered thick clouds. Fog rolled through the mountain valleys like a living thing, swallowing everything. Butler was flying blind now. No horizon, no landmarks, just gray emptiness and the instruments on his panel. Instruments he wasn't trained to trust, wasn't certified to use. He should have turned back, should have diverted to an airport with better weather, should have landed and waited it out. But he kept going. Witnesses on the ground later reported seeing the aircraft flying in and out of clouds at dangerously low altitude, dipping below the cloud deck, then disappearing again, searching for visibility, trying to find a way through. At one point, someone saw the plane attempting to land on a highway, desperate, lost, running out of options. Brush Mountain, sometimes called Brushy Mountain, rises 3,000 feet above the Roanoke Valley. Its peak was hidden in clouds that day. Invisible, deadly. At approximately 4:08 p.m., the Aero Commander flew into the side of Brush Mountain. The impact point was about 400 feet below the summit. The aircraft disintegrated. Metal tore apart. Fuel ignited. Fire consumed everything. All 6 people on board died instantly. The wreckage burned in the forest, smoke rising through the clouds, invisible to the world below. When the aircraft failed to arrive in Martinsville, friends waiting at the airport grew concerned. Hours passed. Phone calls were made. By late afternoon, it was clear something was wrong. The Civil Air Patrol launched a search. Units from Danville, Martinsville, Roanoke, Buckingham, Hillsville, and Lynchburg took to the air. The Eastern Air Search and Rescue Center at Robins Air Force Base deployed 31 aircraft. But the weather that had killed Murphy now hampered the search. Poor visibility, thick fog. No flight plan had been filed, so searchers didn't even know exactly where to look. Hours turned into days. May 29th, no sign of the wreckage. May 30th, Memorial Day. Searchers flew pattern after pattern over the Virginia mountains, finding nothing. May 31st, 3 days after the crash, Colonel Hale and Major Slusser of the Virginia Wing Civil Air Patrol spotted something on Brush Mountain. Wreckage. Burned metal. Bodies. They'd found Audie Murphy. The recovery was grim. The crash site was remote, accessible only by hiking through dense forest. The bodies were badly mangled, many burned beyond recognition. Identification required dental records and personal effects. Lincoln Carl, a business associate, confirmed that 2 close friends had positively identified Murphy's body. The news hit the front page of newspapers across America on June 1st, 1971. The New York Times. Audie Murphy, war hero and actor, killed in plane crash. Los Angeles Times. Audie Murphy dies in crash. War's most decorated GI. America mourned. Politicians issued statements. Veterans groups prepared tributes. Hollywood remembered one of their own. But the most poignant responses came from ordinary people, veterans who'd served, families who'd lost loved ones in war, kids who'd grown up watching Murphy's westerns on Saturday afternoon television. He'd been more than a war hero. More than an actor, he'd been a symbol of American courage, resilience, the idea that even the smallest among us can become a giant when necessity demands it. The National Transportation Safety Board investigated the crash. Their final report, issued June 15, 1972, determined the probable cause. The pilot's attempt to continue visual flight into adverse weather conditions at an altitude too low to clear the mountainous terrain. The board also finds that the pilot attempted to continue flight into instrument weather conditions, which were beyond his operational capabilities. In December 1971, Murphy's widow Pamela and their two sons filed a wrongful death lawsuit seeking $10 million in damages. The case went to trial. In 1975, a jury awarded the Murphy family $2.5 million to be paid by Colorado Aviation, Inc., but no amount of money could bring him back. Pamela Murphy moved into a small apartment and took a clerk position at the Sepulveda Veterans Administration Hospital in Los Angeles. She worked there for 35 years, quietly, helping other veterans, honoring her husband's memory through service. The Texas state legislature ordered all flags on state buildings flown at half-staff. Sacramento, California canceled its annual Independence Day parade. Murphy had been scheduled to serve as Grand Marshal. Instead, they held a memorial service on July 4th. Murphy's hometown of Farmersville, Texas, held services. Local businesses closed for an hour. The VFW Post helped organize the memorial. People who'd known him as a boy came to pay respects to the legend he'd become. A larger memorial service was held in Hollywood Hills. Surprisingly few Hollywood celebrities attended, but 6 Medal of Honor recipients came. General John W. O'Daniel came. Veterans of the 3rd Infantry Division who'd fought alongside Murphy came. They came because Murphy had been one of them, because he'd never forgotten where he came from, because even when Hollywood made him famous, even when medals made him a hero, he'd remained one of them. On June 7, 1971, Audie Leon Murphy was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. Ambassador George H.W. Bush attended. Army Chief of Staff William Westmoreland attended. Members of the 3rd Infantry Division, veterans who'd served with Murphy in Europe, stood at attention as the flag-draped coffin was carried to its final resting place. Murphy's gravesite is in Section 46. Grave 366-11, located across Memorial Drive from the Memorial Amphitheater. By his own request, his headstone is plain and inconspicuous, identical to every other soldier's marker. No gold leaf, no special decoration, despite his Medal of Honor. Even in death, Murphy refused to be elevated above his brothers. The headstone reads, Audie L. Murphy, Texas Major Infantry, World War II, Korea. June 20, 1924, May 28, 1971. Medal of Honor, DSCSSLM. The birth year is 1924, listed as 1924. The date from his falsified enlistment papers. Even his tombstone carries the lie he told to get into the army. The lie that allowed him to become a hero. So many people wanted to pay their respects that Arlington Cemetery constructed a special flagstone walkway to his grave. The foot traffic was wearing away the grass. His gravesite became the 2nd most visited in Arlington National Cemetery. Only President John F. Kennedy's grave sees more visitors. Every year, veterans make pilgrimages there. They leave coins, pennies for respect, nickels for having served in the same basic training, dimes for having served in combat together, quarters for being present when Murphy died. The coins pile up, glinting in the sunlight, a testament to remembrance. Every year on Memorial Day, on Veterans Day, on Murphy's birthday, flowers appear, flags are planted. People come to stand in silence before the simple white stone and remember what one small man from Texas proved possible. They come because Audie Murphy's story matters, because it reminds us that heroes don't look like we expect. They're often small, young, scared, carrying wounds no one can see. But when the moment demands it, they step forward anyway. They come because Murphy never stopped fighting. Not on the battlefield, not in Hollywood, not with his demons, not with his debts. He kept moving forward, because surrender wasn't in him. They come because Murphy used his fame to help others, because he broke the silence about PTSD when no one else would, because he advocated for veterans when it wasn't politically convenient, because he gave permission to an entire generation of traumatized soldiers to admit they were hurting. They come because on January 26, 1945, one man stood against an army and refused to break, and history will never forget it. Part 8. The Eternal Legend. Death is not the end for men like Audie Murphy. The body may fall, the breath may cease, but the spirit, the example, the inspiration, the proof that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things, that lives forever. In the decades since his death, Murphy's legacy has only grown. The Audie L. Murphy Memorial VA Hospital in San Antonio opened in 1973, providing care for thousands of veterans. It stands as a living monument to Murphy's advocacy, his insistence that veterans deserve support for invisible wounds as much as visible ones. In 1986, the Sergeant Audie Murphy Club was established at Fort Hood, Texas. It has since spread to military installations worldwide, an exclusive club honoring non-commissioned officers who exemplify the courage, leadership, and integrity Murphy embodied. To be inducted is one of the highest honors an NCO can receive. The Audie Murphy American Cotton Museum in Greenville, Texas, houses the largest collection of Murphy memorabilia. A 10-foot bronze statue of Murphy stands outside, frozen in a moment of eternal vigilance. Inside, visitors can see his medals, his uniforms, photographs from his life, and artifacts from the cotton industry that defined his childhood. Every year, the museum hosts Audie Murphy Days, celebrating his birthday with ceremonies, veterans gatherings, and educational programs teaching new generations about the boy from Hunt County who became America's most decorated soldier. Texas declared June 20th as Audie Murphy Day in 1996. Every year, the state officially honors his memory. In 2013, Murphy was posthumously awarded the Texas Legislative Medal of Honor, Texas's supreme military decoration. The award was presented to his sole surviving sibling, Nadine Murphy Lockie, at a ceremony in Farmersville. But Murphy's legacy extends beyond awards and memorials. His story has inspired millions. Books have been written about him. Biographies, studies, analyses of his military tactics and psychological struggles. David A. Smith's The Price of Valor, 2015, provided groundbreaking insight into Murphy's PTSD struggles. Don Graham's No Name on the Bullet, 1989, examined his Hollywood career and complex personality. To Hell and Back remains in print, still read by military personnel, history students, and anyone seeking to understand what war really demands of those who fight it. The 1955 film adaptation, starring Murphy as himself, is considered a classic war film. It's shown in military academies, used in leadership courses, referenced in studies of combat trauma. Murphy's performance, understated, haunted, authentic, set a standard for how veterans should be portrayed on screen. Modern actors cite Murphy as an influence. Directors reference his films. Military historians study his tactics. Psychologists use his case as an early example of PTSD awareness. His influence on PTSD recognition cannot be overstated. By speaking publicly about his struggles in the 1960s and early 1970s, Murphy helped destigmatize mental health issues in the military. He gave veterans permission to seek help, proved that psychological wounds were as real, as worthy of treatment, as physical injuries. When the term post-traumatic stress disorder was officially recognized in 1980, it was partly dishes like Murphy had forced America to acknowledge that combat leaves scars on the soul as well as the body. On Brush Mountain in Virginia, near the site of the plane crash, the veterans of foreign wars placed a stone monument in 1974. It's tucked into the Jefferson National Forest, accessible by a hiking trail that's become part of the Appalachian Trail. Every year on the anniversary of Murphy's death, veterans and hikers make the pilgrimage to the monument. They leave coins, flags, notes of gratitude. They stand in the quiet forest and remember. Roger Dixon, a Roanoke County resident and veteran, hikes to the monument annually. He explained his tradition to reporters. In the military, if you find a coin on a grave or monument, a penny means you came by to pay your respects. A nickel means you served in basic with them. A dime means you served in combat. A quarter means you were with them when they died. I'm going to lay this penny down to honor Audie Murphy and pay my respects. Murphy's grave at Arlington remains one of the cemetery's most photographed sites. Tour guides always included in their routes. Busloads of school children visit to learn about the small man with the big courage. Veterans stand before it and salute. The simple white headstone, identical to those surrounding it, has become a pilgrimage site. A place where people come to touch history, to connect with heroism, to remember that greatness doesn't require size or wealth or privilege. All it requires is courage. The U.S. Army has declared there will never be another Audie Murphy. Modern warfare, with its technology and tactics, makes his type of sustained frontline heroism nearly impossible to replicate. Murphy logged 400 days of continuous combat, a record unlikely to ever be matched. His Medal of Honor citation is taught at West Point, at Fort Benning, at every Army leadership school. This is what courage looks like, instructors tell cadets. This is what refusing to quit means. His story transcends military history. It's become part of American mythology, proof that the smallest among us can become giants, that courage is a choice, that heroism lives in ordinary people, waiting for extraordinary circumstances to reveal it. Audie Leon Murphy never wanted to be a hero. He just wanted to survive, wanted to feed his family, wanted to escape poverty, wanted to prove that his life mattered. And in proving it, he showed millions of others that their lives matter too. His final words on his memoir, To Hell and Back, still resonate. Now I have finished the story, such as it is, and I find no moral. The war has been a horrible nightmare that leaves me empty of all emotion. I look at the ribbon and medals. They mean nothing. They are merely symbols of the grim harvest war reaps. But Murphy was wrong about one thing. There is a moral to his story. It's written in the faces of the men he's safe at Holtzwehr, in the veterans who found courage to seek help after hearing him speak about PTSD, in the countless soldiers who read his story and found strength to continue, in the children who visit his grave and learn that heroes come in all sizes. The moral is simple. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. Heroism is not being unbreakable. It's continuing to fight even after you've been broken. Legacy is not about the medals you earn. It's about the lives you touch, the example you set, the permission you give others to be brave. Audie Murphy was born into darkness, poverty, abandonment, hunger, loss. He could have become nothing. Statistics said he should have died young, forgotten, another casualty of America's Great Depression. Instead, he became everything. A soldier who saved nations, an actor who entertained millions, an advocate who helped veterans, a symbol of American courage that will endure as long as people remember that freedom isn't free, that heroes exist, that even the smallest among us can change history. On January 26, 1945, a 19-year-old kid from Texas climbed onto a burning tank destroyer and held the line against an entire German assault force. That moment defined courage for generations. That moment proved that one person can make a difference. That moment showed the world what Audie Murphy was made of. Steel, wrapped in soft Texas cotton, determination forged in poverty's fires, and a refusal to surrender that transcended flesh and bone. He stood alone against impossible odds, and he won. Not because he was superhuman, but because when the choice came, stand or run, fight or surrender, live or die, Audie Murphy chose to stand. And in standing, he became immortal.